Now let's begin. I woke up to the sound of Emma's laughter echoing through our two-story colonial in suburban Connecticut. Saturday mornings were sacred in the Aguirre household. Pancakes, cartoons, and my daughter's endless energy that somehow never depleted. At 34, I'd built a good life as a civil litigation attorney. Nothing glamorous, mostly contract disputes and property cases, but it paid well enough for Melissa to pursue her passion for interior design part-time, and for us to give Emma everything we never had growing up. "Daddy, watch this," Emma called from the living room, attempting a cartwheel that ended with her giggling on the carpet. 10 out of 10, I said, scooping her up. Olympic gold medal material. Melissa appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, her dark hair still messy from sleep. "Don't encourage her. She'll be doing backflips off the furniture by noon." "Already ahead of you, Mom," Emma grinned. We'd been married 7 years, together for 9. Melissa was everything I'd wanted. Intelligent, beautiful, grounded. Her parents, Edward and Deborah Powers, had been less enthusiastic about their daughter marrying a kid from the Bronx whose parents worked double shifts to keep the lights on. Edward, a retired bank executive, had made his skepticism clear at our first meeting. "Lawyers are a dime a dozen," he'd said, swirling his scotch. "Hope you're one of the good ones." I'd proved myself, but the relationship remained cordial at best. Still, they were Emma's grandparents, and Melissa adored her father despite his cold demeanor. The week before Emma's 6th birthday, Melissa insisted on throwing a party at Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. "My parents want to host it," she explained. "Dad already made the reservation. You know how he is." I did know. Edward Powers liked control, liked showing off his wealth, liked reminding me that his money had cushioned our early years when my practice was struggling. I'd paid him back every cent 2 years ago, but he still found ways to hold it over me. The party itself had been fine. 20 kids screaming, parents making small talk, Edward holding court like some patriarch from a bygone era. He'd insisted on taking Emma to the restaurant's garden area for special grandpa-granddaughter time, while the cake was being prepared. Melissa had thought it was sweet. I'd been too busy managing chaos to think much of it. That was 3 weeks ago. Now, sitting at my desk on a Tuesday afternoon reviewing a mundane breach of contract case, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Darren Aguirre," I answered. "Mr. Aguirre, this is Malcolm Robertson, general manager at Romano's." His voice was tight, strained. "We found something on our security footage from your daughter's birthday party. Your wife's father. I can't say it over the phone. Please come. Alone. Don't bring your wife." My blood went cold. "What kind of something?" "Please, just come. As soon as possible." The drive to Romano's took 15 minutes, but felt like hours. Malcolm met me at the back entrance, his face pale, hands trembling slightly as he led me to his office. One of our security techs was reviewing footage for an insurance claim, Malcolm explained, pulling up a video file on his computer. "Different incident, different day, but he noticed. He saw the timestamp from your party and recognized." He stopped, unable to continue. "I have a daughter too. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The footage was from a camera covering the garden area, partially obscured by decorative plants, but clear enough. Timestamp, 3:47 p.m. I watched Edward lead Emma to a secluded corner, glancing around to ensure they were alone. What happened in the next 4 minutes destroyed everything. I didn't watch it all. Couldn't. My hands gripped the desk so hard I thought the wood might crack. Edward Powers, respected community member, devoted grandfather, had. "Stop it," I managed. Malcolm immediately closed the video. "I haven't shown this to anyone else. I wanted you to know first. I called the police after I found it, but I haven't sent them the footage yet. Thought you should see it before. Send it to them." My voice sounded strange, distant. "Now." I walked to the parking lot in a daze, got in my car, and called 911. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the phone. "I need to report a crime. An assault. There's video evidence. Romano's restaurant on Maple Street. They have it. They'll give it to you." The operator asked questions I answered mechanically. "Yes, my daughter. Yes, I've seen the footage. No, the perpetrator doesn't know we have this evidence." When she asked for his name, I almost couldn't say it. "Edward Powers, 62 years old. Lives at 847 Birchwood Lane." I sat in that parking lot for an hour after the call, watching people come and go from the restaurant, living their normal lives while mine had just imploded. My phone rang, "Melissa." I let it go to voicemail. How could I tell her? How could I even form the words? Detective Christopher McDaniel called an hour later. Mr. Aguirre, I'm with SVU. We've received the footage and your report. I need you to come to the station. We need a full statement, and we need to establish a safety plan for your daughter. The station was sterile, fluorescent bright, smelling of burnt coffee and institutional cleaning products. McDaniel was in his late 40s, graying at the temples, with the kind of tired eyes that had seen too much. First priority is Emma's safety, he said after I'd given my statement. Has she exhibited any behavioral changes? Nightmares, regression, fear of certain people or situations? I thought back over the past 3 weeks, guilt crushing my chest. She's been quieter. Had a few nightmares. I thought it was just adjustment from all the birthday excitement. We'll need her to speak with a forensic interviewer, someone specially trained for these situations. Given the clear evidence, we can obtain a warrant for Powers' arrest immediately. But I need to ask, does he have any reason to suspect we're onto him? No. Nobody knows except you, me, and the restaurant manager. Good. Keep it that way. We'll execute the warrant tomorrow morning. I need you to act completely normal until then. Can you do that? Normal. The word felt like a sick joke. What about my wife? She needs to know. After the arrest. I know that's hard, but we can't risk Powers being tipped off. He could flee, destroy evidence. McDaniel's expression softened. I have kids too. I know what you're going through. He didn't. Nobody could. I went home, walked through the door to find Melissa making dinner while Emma colored at the kitchen table. There's my guy, Melissa smiled. Tough day. Long one. I managed, kissing her forehead, the lie tasting like poison. I knelt beside Emma. Hey, sweetheart. How was school? Good. We learned about butterflies. Did you know they taste with their feet? I didn't know that. I pulled her into a hug, breathing in her strawberry-scented shampoo, fighting the rage and anguish that threatened to break me apart. That night, after Emma was asleep, Melissa curled up beside me on the couch. You okay? You've been quiet. Just work stress. Big case. Another lie. They were piling up, suffocating me. My dad called earlier. Wants to know if we're coming to their anniversary dinner next weekend. I almost threw up. We'll see. At 6:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. McDaniel, warrant executed. Powers in custody. Need you to bring Melissa and Emma to the station. Forensic interviewer standing by. This was it. No more delays, no more lies. Melissa, I sat on the edge of our bed. Get dressed. We need to go somewhere. What? Darren, what's going on? Please trust me. Get Emma ready. We need to go now. The fear in her eyes nearly broke me, but she moved, years of marriage teaching her when not to push. The drive to the station was silent except for Emma's questions about why we were up so early, where we were going, why Mommy looked scared. McDaniel met us in the lobby. Mrs. Aguirre, Emma, thank you for coming. Emma, I have someone who wants to meet you. Her name is Nora, and she has a really cool playroom where you two can talk and play. Would that be okay? Emma looked at me uncertainly. I nodded, throat tight. It's okay, princess. Mommy and I will be right here. Nora Payne, the forensic interviewer, was gentle and warm as she led Emma away. Melissa turned to me, eyes wild. Darren, what the hell is happening? McDaniel gestured to a private room. Mrs. Aguirre, please sit down. No. Tell me right now. Your father was arrested this morning for an assault. McDaniel's words were clinical, practiced. Against Emma. At her birthday party 3 weeks ago. There's video evidence. The color drained from Melissa's face. She looked at me, searching for the lie, the mistake, anything but confirmation. Whatever she saw in my expression made her knees buckle. I caught her as she collapsed, guided her to a chair. No, she whispered. No, that's impossible. My father would never. I saw the footage, I said quietly. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The sound she made was inhuman, a keening wail that came from somewhere deep and primal. I held her while she shattered, while her world rewrote itself in the span of seconds, while everything she believed about her family, her childhood, her father, turned to ash. When Emma emerged an hour later, she was subdued but okay. Nora pulled us aside. She disclosed. She's incredibly brave. The video evidence combined with her testimony, this case is solid. But she'll need therapy, ongoing support. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Over the following days, the investigation expanded in horrifying ways. A search of Edward's home computer revealed thousands of images. Not just of Emma, other children, unknown victims across years. The FBI got involved. Edward Powers wasn't just an opportunistic predator. He was a collector, a traitor, potentially part of a larger network. Melissa's mother, Deborah, appeared at our door 3 days after the arrest, looking like she'd aged a decade. "I didn't know," she sobbed. "I swear to God, I didn't know." But as detectives dug deeper, inconsistencies emerged. Financial records showed Deborah had paid off 2 families in the early 2000s, substantial sums with NDAs attached. When confronted, she crumbled. "He promised he'd get help," she cried. "He swore it would never happen again. I thought if I protected the family, if we kept it quiet." Melissa looked at her mother with an expression of pure betrayal. You knew, and you let him near Emma. I thought he'd changed. I thought." "Get out of my house," Melissa said, her voice deadly calm. "Get out and never come back." I'd never been prouder of her. But pride and horror couldn't coexist for long. The legal process ground forward. Arraignment, bail hearing, denied. Thank God, preliminary hearings. Edward's attorney tried every trick, suppressing evidence, challenging the search warrant, attacking the forensic interview protocol. Each maneuver failed. Then came the call from McDaniel that changed everything. Powers' attorney approached us with a plea deal. 20 years, registry as a sex offender, full allocution. He knows he's cooked. The evidence is overwhelming. "No," I said immediately. "Darren, I understand your anger, but 20 years is. He gets life, or we go to trial. Put Emma through testimony if we have to. I want him to die in prison." McDaniel sighed. With his age and health issues, 20 years might be a death sentence anyway. And trials are brutal on child victims. "Are you sure?" I looked at Emma, playing in her room but still jumping at loud noises, still having nightmares, still asking why Grandpa was in trouble. "Tell his lawyer to try again. 30 years minimum, no parole possibility. Or we see him in court." The counteroffer came back within a day. 30 years, mandatory registration, full admission of guilt to all charges. But accepting that deal felt like failure. Edward Powers would be in some federal facility, probably in protective custody, maybe getting out in 25 with good behavior. He'd be 87. Maybe he'd die there. Maybe he wouldn't. It wasn't enough. I started researching. Late nights after Melissa fell asleep, I dug into the federal prison system, protective custody protocols, sentence reductions, parole boards. I studied Edward's co-conspirators from the FBI investigation, 7 arrests so far, a network spanning 3 states. I learned about prison hierarchies, about what happens to child predators behind bars, about the unofficial justice that sometimes occurs despite best efforts to prevent it. And I started planning. Travis Howe, my best friend since law school, found me in my home office at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday, surrounded by printouts and legal pads covered in notes. "Melissa called me," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "She's worried about you." "I'm worried about you." "Don't be." I didn't look up. "Darren, you need therapy. You need to talk to someone. This obsession, it's not obsession. It's justice. Justice is him going to prison, which is happening." I finally met his eyes. "Is it? 30 years in protective custody, 3 meals a day, medical care, possibly out in 25? While Emma has a lifetime of therapy ahead of her. While those other families suffer. While Deborah walks free despite being complicit." Travis sat down heavily. "What are you planning?" "I don't know yet. But whatever it is, it needs to be more than this." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks after the arrest. As the prosecutor laid out the evidence, the video, Emma's testimony, the seized materials, the FBI's findings, I watched Edward Powers sit beside his attorney with the same imperious expression he'd worn at every family dinner. No remorse. No shame. Just cold calculation of how to minimize consequences. During a recess, his eyes met mine across the courtroom. He smirked. That smirk made my decision for me. Legal justice wasn't enough. The system, for all its procedures and protections, couldn't deliver what Edward Powers deserved. But I could. I just needed to figure out how. The file spread across my desk told a story of systematic evil. 6 families had come forward after Edward's arrest, each with their own nightmare. The FBI investigation had uncovered his role in a sophisticated network that traded material, shared strategies for evading detection, even coordinated access to victims through seemingly legitimate youth programs and charities Edward had funded over the years. One name kept appearing: Gary Frazier, a former youth pastor arrested 3 days after Edward. The FBI had found their correspondence going back 15 years. Frazier was cooperating, spilling everything in exchange for a reduced sentence. Through his testimony, prosecutors had identified 12 more potential victims and 3 additional conspirators. I requested the discovery materials through my attorney credentials, claiming I was assisting with Emma's victim impact statement. What I got was a roadmap of Edward's entire operation. At night, I'd lie beside Melissa, feeling her body shake with silent sobs, and I'd think about that smirk. Emma was in therapy twice a week now. She'd stopped sleeping in her own room, terrified of the dark. She asked why Grandpa wanted to hurt her, what she'd done wrong. No answer I gave helped. Travis kept checking on me, growing increasingly concerned. "You're not sleeping. You're losing weight. Talk to me." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Nobody would be fine." "But this," he gestured at my office, "the obsessive research, the dark circles under my eyes. This isn't healthy." You know what's not healthy? Him breathing free air in 25 years while Emma's still dealing with this trauma. Deborah walking around town like she didn't enable it. The system letting them off easy because prison is expensive and trials are hard. So what's your plan? Vigilante justice? You're a lawyer, Darren. You know how this ends. Do I? Because right now all I know is the law failed my daughter before I even knew she needed protecting. The plea agreement was finalized in early November. 30 years in federal custody, lifetime registration, mandatory therapy. The judge accepted it with a stern lecture about the severity of the crimes and the depth of the betrayal. Edward stood there, blank-faced, and apologized in a monotone clearly coached by his attorney. "I'm deeply sorry for the pain I've caused," he recited. "I take full responsibility and accept the consequences of my actions." Lies. All of it. Melissa didn't attend. She couldn't bear to see him. I went, with Emma's therapist present, to provide a victim impact statement. Standing at that podium, looking at Edward Powers in his orange jumpsuit, I wanted to vault over the barrier and strangle him with my bare hands. Instead, I read the statement Melissa and I had prepared, describing Emma's nightmares, her fear, her innocence stolen. Edward stared at the wall behind me the entire time. After sentencing, as marshals prepared to transport him to FCI Cumberland in Maryland, I approached his attorney. "Which facility?" I asked, as if making casual conversation. "Cumberland. Medium security, protective custody wing. Your family should have no concerns about contact." "I'm sure." I shook his hand, thanked him for his professionalism, and walked away with exactly what I needed to know. That night, I opened a bottle of scotch, Edward's preferred brand, ironically, and began mapping out a plan that would make his smirk permanent. Travis appeared at my door near midnight. "Let me in. It's late." "Let me in." I stepped aside. He took one look at my desk, facility layouts, guard shift patterns, inmate demographics, commissary access points, and his face went pale. "Jesus Christ, Darren. What are you doing?" "Research." "This isn't research. This is..." He stopped, running his hands through his hair. "You're going to throw your life away. Your career, your family, everything. For what?" "He's already in prison. In protective custody. Safe. Federal sheltered. While Emma can't even sleep alone in her own room." "So you'll what? Break into a federal prison? Assault him? Murder him? And then what happens to Emma when you're in the cell next to him?" That stopped me. Because Travis was right. I couldn't help Emma from prison. Couldn't protect her, guide her, be there for her healing. But I could make sure Edward Powers never felt safe again. Never smiled, never smirked, never felt the smug satisfaction of getting away with anything. I just had to be smarter about it. "What if," I said slowly, "there was a way to ensure real justice without direct involvement? What if the system could be encouraged to function properly?" Travis looked at me warily. "I don't like where this is going. Hear me out. Edward's in protective custody because general population would tear him apart. Child predators have a specific life expectancy in prison, and it's measured in months, not years. What if? No, absolutely not. You're not orchestrating someone's murder. I'm not orchestrating anything. I'm simply acknowledging reality, and perhaps making sure that reality has the opportunity to occur naturally." "Darren, the FBI investigation uncovered 7 co-conspirators, right? Gary Frazier's cooperating, but the others aren't. They're protecting the network, staying quiet, waiting out their sentences. What if someone made sure the right people knew who was talking? Travis sat down heavily. You're talking about marking Frazier as a snitch. He'll be killed. He's a child predator who facilitated Edward's access to victims. He deserves whatever happens. Maybe, but you don't get to decide that. And you definitely don't get to play executioner by proxy. We argued until dawn. Travis trying to pull me back from the edge, me explaining that there was no edge. I'd already fallen and was simply looking for the softest landing. Finally, exhausted, he left with a warning. If you do this, I can't be part of it. I can't know about it. And if you get caught, I can't protect you. I know. Do you? Because the man I knew, my best friend, wouldn't even consider this. That man died the day he watched 4 minutes of security footage. This is who's left. Alone again, I refined my approach. No direct action. No traceable connections. Just information flowing to people who'd act on their own initiative. The federal prison system has its own ecosystem, its own power structures, its own brutal logic. Child predators are universally despised. Snitches are eliminated without hesitation. Edward Powers was already vulnerable on one count. Adding the second would make him indefensible. But I needed leverage on someone inside. A guard, an inmate, someone positioned to spread the right rumor at the right time. The answer came from an unexpected source, Deborah. She'd been ostracized after her complicity came to light, abandoned by her social circle, shunned by extended family. Melissa had obtained a restraining order keeping her away from Emma. Her assets were frozen pending civil litigation from the families Edward had hurt. She called me 2 months after sentencing. I need help, she said, voice hollow. The attorneys say I could lose everything. The house, the savings, all of it. Good. Please. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I didn't know the extent. You knew enough. You paid off families. You protected him. I was trying to protect my family. You sacrificed other people's children to protect your reputation. You enabled a monster. Now you get to live with the consequences. She was quiet for a long moment. Is there any way to make this right? Any way to help Emma? To show I'm sorry? An idea crystallized. Maybe. But it would require you doing exactly what I say, without question. Anything. I'll call you back. I spent 3 days considering the ethics, the risks, the implications. Then I called her with instructions. You're going to visit Edward. He won't see me. He blames me for not warning him about the footage. Make him see you. Tell him you have information about witness cooperation, about people talking to prosecutors. Tell him you can help if he'll take your calls. What information? Doesn't matter. Once you're on his approved visitor list, you'll be his conduit. I'll feed you details about the FBI investigation, about who's cooperating, about what evidence they have. Real information mixed with strategic lies. And you'll pass it along. Why? What does this accomplish? It accomplishes justice. Real justice. The kind that doesn't come with appeals and parole boards. She understood then. I heard her breath catch. You want me to help get him killed. I want you to help ensure the natural consequences of his actions. What happens after that is beyond my control. I'll go to prison too. Probably not. You're a victim of his manipulation, remember? Psychological abuse, coercive control. Your attorney can argue that angle. But even if you do some time, it'll be nothing compared to what you deserve. Another long silence. When do I start? We spent weeks choreographing it. Deborah visited Edward weekly, building trust, establishing herself as his only link to the outside world. She brought news about legal appeals, about the families suing him, about prosecutors building additional cases. And then, carefully, she mentioned Gary Frazier's cooperation. The prosecutor told their attorney that Frazier's testimony has been invaluable, she said during a visit I'd scripted. Apparently he's providing details about the network, about how everything operated. They're using him to build cases against the others. I watched Edward's reaction through the facility's visiting room camera footage that Deborah later described. His face had gone white. How much is he telling them? Everything, apparently. Names, dates, methods. He's trying to reduce his sentence. That fucking coward. Perfect. Over subsequent visits, Deborah fed him more information about Frazier's cooperation. Each revelation calculated to increase Edward's paranoia and rage. She mentioned that Frazier had implicated Edward as the network's leader, that he'd described specific incidents in graphic detail, that prosecutors were using his testimony to deny plea deals to the others. Edward's attorney requested a meeting with prosecutors, trying to negotiate his own cooperation in exchange for better conditions. They declined. They already had everything they needed from Frazier. That rejection sealed it. Within the protective custody unit at FCI Cumberland, Edward Powers began spreading word that Gary Frazier was cooperating with prosecutors, providing testimony against other network members. He had documentation, letters from Deborah describing the prosecutor's statements, details that could only have come from someone with inside knowledge. Frazier was in a different facility, FCI Butner in North Carolina. But the network extended across institutions. Inmates communicated through contraband phones, through messages passed via released prisoners, through coded letters. Within 3 weeks, everyone in the network knew Gary Frazier was talking. Within 4 weeks, someone in general population at FCI Butner learned that Frazier was a cooperating witness in a child predator case. Within 5 weeks, Frazier was in the infirmary with 3 broken ribs and a ruptured spleen after an accident in the laundry room. He survived, barely, and was transferred to administrative segregation, 23 hours a day in a cell, no contact with other inmates, living in constant fear. The news reached Edward through the same network channels. I watched Deborah relay it during a visit, saw his expression shift to satisfaction. "He's getting what he deserves," Edward said. "So will you," Deborah replied quietly. I'd told her to plant that seed, to begin his unraveling. What does that mean? It means people know about our conversations. People know you've been feeding information about cooperation. People know you have detailed knowledge about who's talking and what they're saying. I watched Edward's smugness evaporate. "You said." "I said I'd bring you information." "I did. I never said where it came from or who else might be listening." She stood to leave. "Wait. Deborah, wait." But she was gone, and Edward Powers was left to contemplate a terrible possibility. If he'd marked Frazier as a snitch, who might mark him the same way? The paranoia set in fast. Edward requested transfers, filed complaints about his safety, demanded better protective custody measures. The facility responded with standard protocols, enhanced supervision, limited contact, monitoring. Not enough to stop what came next. Because I'd planned one final move, one last piece of the puzzle that would transform Edward's 30-year sentence into something far worse. And it all depended on someone I'd never met, Ernesto Case. Ernesto Case was serving 25 years at FCI Cumberland for armed robbery and conspiracy to distribute narcotics. His file read like a catalog of violence: 3 assaults on inmates, 2 on guards, countless disciplinary infractions. He'd been in and out of solitary for most of his sentence. He also had a daughter, Emma's age, coincidentally. A daughter he'd never met because his girlfriend had left while he was awaiting trial, taking their child somewhere he couldn't find them. I learned this from the discovery materials in an unrelated case where Case had been called as a witness to a prison stabbing. His victim impact statement from his own sentencing mentioned the daughter, the regret, the life he'd thrown away. And I learned he was assigned to the protective custody unit at Cumberland, working in the kitchen with special security clearance. I drafted a letter, handwritten, on plain paper, with no return address. "Mr. Case, I'm writing to tell you about a man in your unit. Edward Powers, Unit 4B, Cell 17. He's serving 30 years for assault against his 6-year-old granddaughter. This isn't disputed. There's video evidence, full admission of guilt. But here's what you don't know. He was part of a network. Facilitated access to children through charity programs. Traded materials. Corrupted other adults. The FBI identified 12 victims, but the real number is probably much higher. He shows no remorse. Smirks about his crimes. Believes 30 years is a minor inconvenience. I'm telling you this because you have a daughter. Because you understand what it means to fail a child. Because you might want to ensure that someone who deliberately destroyed children's lives doesn't get to serve his sentence in relative comfort. What you do with this information is your choice. But you deserve to know who's eating meals you prepared. A father. I sent it anonymously, from a public mailbox in New York City during a business trip, using gloves to avoid fingerprints. 3 weeks later, during a routine kitchen shift, Ernesto Case, accidentally, spilled a pot of boiling water on Edward Powers' legs and groin. 3rd-degree burns, emergency surgery, permanent disfigurement. Case received 18 months in solitary and additional charges. He told investigators it was an accident, that the pot slipped. No one believed him, but without proof of intent, they couldn't make a stronger case stick. Edward survived, but was wheelchair-bound for months, in constant pain, marked now not just as a child predator, but as someone whose presence provoked violence even in protective custody. The facility moved him to administrative segregation for his own safety. 23 hours a day in a cell, 1 hour of recreation in a cage, no contact with other inmates, no programs, no commissary privileges, no dignity. Exactly what Gary Frazier was experiencing. Exactly what Edward had facilitated with his information campaign. Perfect symmetry. When Deborah told me about the attack during one of our carefully monitored phone calls, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, no vindication. Just cold certainty that I'd done what needed to be done. Is it over? She asked. No, it's never over. But it's enough. What happens to me now? You keep visiting him. You keep reminding him that his victims are living their lives while he's locked in a box. You keep making sure he understands exactly what he's lost. And then you live with what you enabled. Every day, for the rest of your life. I hung up before she could respond. Travis found out, of course. He was too good a lawyer and knew me too well not to piece it together. The letter to case, he said, standing in my office without invitation. The information to Deborah. The whole thing. It was you. I didn't deny it. Yes. Jesus Christ, Darren. Do you understand what you've done? If anyone traces this back, they won't. There's no evidence, no connection, nothing that ties me to any of it. Deborah visited her husband. Normal. Case attacked a child predator. Happens constantly. Frazier got marked as a snitch, occupational hazard. You orchestrated assault. Potentially murder if Frazier had died. I provided information. What people did with it was their choice. That's not a defense, and you know it. I don't need a defense because I won't be charged. There's no case. Travis stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. What happened to you? The guy I knew in law school would never. That guy didn't have a daughter who asks why grandpa wanted to hurt her. Didn't watch his wife cry herself to sleep every night. Didn't see security footage of, I stopped, forcing control. That guy was naive. Thought the system worked. Now I know better. The system did work. Edward's in prison. In protective custody. Safe. Until I made sure he wasn't. And you're okay with that? With what you've become? I considered the question honestly. I don't know. Ask me in 10 years when Emma's sleeping through the night again. When she trusts people again. When she doesn't flinch at men with gray hair. She might never get there. Trauma doesn't work on a schedule. Then I guess I'll never know. Travis left without another word. We didn't speak for 3 months after that. But I didn't regret it. Couldn't regret it. Because 6 months after the attack, I received a letter from FCI Cumberland. From Ernesto Case. Mr. Aguirre, I know it was you who sent the letter. I don't know how you found me or why you picked me specifically, but I'm not stupid. I just wanted to say thank you. I never got to be a father to my daughter. I fucked up my life before she was born, and I'll probably die in here. But I got to protect her, in a way, by making sure someone like Powers understands that hurting kids has consequences. The 18 months in the hole was worth it. I'd do it again. I hope your daughter heals. I hope she knows her father loves her enough to do whatever it takes. EC. I burned the letter immediately, but the words stayed with me. Whatever it takes. That had become my operating principle. The law had given Edward 30 years. I'd given him hell. And I wasn't finished. Because there were still 6 other conspirators in federal custody, still children suffering from their actions, still families destroyed by their crimes. The network Edward had built wasn't just 7 men. The FBI investigation had identified dozens of periphery members, enablers, consumers, facilitators. People who'd escaped prosecution due to insufficient evidence, but who'd contributed to the ecosystem of abuse. I began compiling files on each of them. Addresses, employment records, family connections, social media activity. Patterns of behavior that suggested ongoing risk. Some had moved to new towns, changed their names, tried to disappear. I found them anyway. Some had jobs working with children again, coaching sports, teaching music, volunteering at youth centers. I sent anonymous tips to local police departments, to school boards, to parents' organizations. Some had rebuilt their lives, seemingly reformed. I monitored them, waiting for the slip, the tell, the indication that they were still dangerous. Melissa thought I was working on a pro bono case, something that required extensive research and late nights. She was grateful I'd found a productive outlet for my anger, encouraged me to channel the pain into helping others. She had no idea the others I was helping were vigilante justice targets. Emma was improving slowly. The nightmares decreased. She started sleeping in her own room again, though only with every light on and the door open. She asked fewer questions about why Grandpa was gone, seemed to accept the careful explanations her therapist provided. But sometimes I'd catch her staring into space, a faraway look in her eyes, and I'd know she was thinking about it. About him. About what he'd done. Those moments fueled me. Reminded me why I couldn't stop, why legal consequences weren't enough. On the 1-year anniversary of Edward's sentencing, I received a call from Detective McDaniel. "Wanted to update you on the case," he said. The FBI's investigation led to 43 additional arrests across 7 states. The network was larger than we initially thought. Your testimony and Emma's disclosure triggered all of it. That's good. It is. But I wanted to ask, have you had any contact with Deborah Powers since the restraining order? My pulse quickened. No. What? She's been visiting Edward regularly. Prison officials noticed their conversations seemed strategic. Coded, almost. They've been monitoring more closely. What are they saying? Can't share specifics, but let's just say someone's feeding Edward information that's getting other inmates hurt. And Deborah's the only consistent outside contact he has. You think she's involved in something? I think someone's using her as a conduit. Question is who? Could be Edward manipulating her. Wouldn't be the first time. Maybe. We're investigating. Just wanted to give you a heads up in case it circles back to your family somehow. Appreciate it. The call ended, and I immediately destroyed my burner phone. The one I'd used to call Deborah with instructions, the one with no connection to my name. They were getting close. Not close enough to prove anything, but close enough that I needed to shut down operations. I called Deborah from a payphone. Stop visiting him. Permanently. Tell the prison you're done, that it's too traumatic. Then disappear. But you said, plans change. Do it today, or you're on your own. She did. Stopped visiting, stopped calling, stopped all contact. Edward was left alone in administrative segregation with no outside connection, no information pipeline, no hope. The FBI investigation into the information leaks at Cumberland went nowhere. No evidence, no proof, nothing that tied anyone to anything. Eventually, they chalked it up to the general dysfunction of prison communication networks and moved on. I'd gotten away with it. But the victory felt hollow. Because Edward Powers was still alive, still breathing, still existing. Not for long, though. 18 months after his sentencing, Edward Powers suffered a massive stroke in his cell. Transported to an outside hospital under guard, he spent 2 weeks in ICU before being declared stable enough to return to custody. The stroke left him partially paralyzed, unable to speak clearly, requiring round-the-clock medical attention that FCI, Cumberland wasn't equipped to provide. He was transferred to the medical facility at FCI Butner, the same prison where Gary Frazier was in administrative segregation. The irony was beautiful. At Butner, Edward's condition deteriorated. Multiple strokes followed the first, each one stripping away more of his cognitive function. He developed infections, pressure sores, complications from immobility. The prison medical staff did their jobs, provided care, managed pain, kept him alive. But barely. I received updates through Deborah, who remained on Edward's approved contact list despite not visiting. The prison would call her with medical updates, and she'd relay them to me. They say he's not responsive anymore, she reported after the 3rd stroke. Locked-in syndrome, maybe. Conscious, but unable to move or communicate. How long can he survive like that? Could be years. Could be weeks. They don't know. Years. Edward Powers could spend years locked in his own body, aware but unable to speak, move, or control anything about his existence. The universe was a better architect of justice than I'd ever be. He died 14 months later from pneumonia. 71 years old, 3 years into a 30-year sentence, having experienced more suffering in those 3 years than most people endure in a lifetime. Deborah called to tell me, "It's over. He's gone." Good. Do you want me to arrange the funeral? I thought maybe for closure. No funeral. No memorial. Cremate him and scatter the ashes somewhere meaningless. He doesn't deserve to be remembered. What about his estate? There's still. It goes to the victims. All of it. Set up a trust for counseling and support services. Make sure Emma gets her share. I'll take care of it. Deborah. Yes. This doesn't absolve you. You know that. I know. I hung up and sat in my office, staring at the files I'd accumulated over 3 years. Evidence of a network dismantled, predators identified, justice served through official channels and unofficial means. Melissa found me there an hour later. You okay? Deborah called. She said Edward died. I know. She sat beside me, taking my hand. How do you feel? I don't know. Empty, maybe. Like I should feel something. Relief, satisfaction, anything. But there's just nothing. That's normal. He can't hurt anyone else now. That's what matters. If only she knew how much effort had gone into ensuring exactly that outcome. Emma took the news better than expected. She'd largely stopped thinking about Edward, her therapist said, had integrated the trauma into her narrative without letting it define her. Is Grandpa still in timeout? She asked when we told her. No, sweetheart. He's gone. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Good. Can we get ice cream? The resilience of children never ceased to amaze me. That night, I burned all my files. Every piece of research, every address, every monitored communication. 3 years of obsessive documentation turned to ash in our fireplace while Melissa slept. Travis came by the next morning. We'd started speaking again, tentatively, with an unspoken agreement never to discuss what I'd done. Heard about Edward, he said. You okay? Everyone keeps asking me that. Because everyone's worried about you. This whole thing, it changed you. We all see it. How? You're harder, colder, less willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe the version of me who trusted people too easily needed to die. And what about the version who believed in the law, in doing things the right way? That version failed my daughter. This version protected her. Travis shook his head sadly. You really believe that? That what you did was protection? I know it was. The system gave Edward 30 years in protective custody. I made sure he served 3 years in hell. Which one protected more children? You don't know that. You don't know if your actions prevented anything or just satisfied your need for revenge. Don't I? Frazier talked because he was terrified. His testimony led to 43 arrests. Edward's paranoia made him sloppy, made the FBI's investigation easier. Case's attack sent a message to every predator in federal custody that they're not safe. So yeah, Travis, I'm pretty fucking sure I protected children. He stared at me for a long moment. You've rationalized every illegal, immoral thing you did into some noble crusade. That's dangerous, Darren. That's how good people become monsters. Then I guess we'll find out which one I am. He left, and I never saw him again. He transferred to a firm in Boston 3 months later. Sent a brief email wishing me well, hoping I'd find peace. I didn't respond. Peace wasn't what I was looking for anymore. 5 years after Edward's death, I stood in Emma's room watching her sleep peacefully. No nightmares, no fear, just the normal rest of an 11-year-old who'd survived something terrible and emerged stronger. She didn't remember much about him anymore. Her therapist said that was normal, that the brain protects itself by suppressing traumatic memories. What she did remember was abstract, disconnected from emotion. Something bad happened when I was little, she'd say if asked. But I'm okay now. And she was. Honor roll student, soccer team captain, surrounded by friends who had no idea what she'd endured. Melissa had done an incredible job protecting her from the publicity, from the court proceedings, from the weight of knowledge that could crush a child. We'd survived, rebuilt, moved on. But I carried it all. Every decision, every manipulation, every consequence of my actions. Gary Frazier committed suicide in administrative segregation 2 years after Edward's death. Hanged himself with a bedsheet. His death barely made the news. Ernesto case was released after 22 years, his sentence reduced for good behavior despite the assault. He moved to Montana, got a job in construction, stayed clean. I monitored him for 6 months before deciding he wasn't a threat. Deborah developed early-onset Alzheimer's at 62. Spent her final years in a memory care facility, sometimes lucid enough to ask about Emma, mostly lost in confusion. She died without ever seeing her granddaughter again. The other network members served their sentences in various facilities. Some died in custody, natural causes, mostly, though 2 were killed by other inmates. Some were released and reoffended, caught within months. Some vanished into registered sex offender databases, living under constant surveillance. I kept tabs on all of them. Passive monitoring now, just checking databases periodically, ensuring none had slipped through the cracks. My practice thrived. I developed a reputation as a fierce litigator who never backed down, never settled cheaply, never let opponents smell weakness. Clients loved it. Opposing counsel feared it. Only I knew where that ruthlessness came from. Melissa and I were good, better than good, actually. Surviving trauma together had either destroyed couples or forged them stronger. We'd become the latter. She'd never know the full extent of what I'd done, but she knew I'd do anything to protect our family. That knowledge was enough. On the 6th anniversary of Emma's birthday party, the one that had changed everything, we threw her a small celebration at home. Just family friends, no big venues, no strangers. Emma blew out her candles and made a wish. "I wished for a puppy," she announced, grinning. "Did you?" I asked. "That's funny, because there might be something in the garage for you." Her squeal of delight as she ran to find the golden retriever puppy we'd adopted was worth everything. Every sleepless night, every moral compromise, every line I'd crossed. This, her joy, her healing, her future, was what mattered. Later that night, after Emma had fallen asleep with the puppy curled beside her bed and Melissa was in the shower, I stepped onto our back porch and looked up at the stars. Somewhere in the universe's grand accounting, I was probably damned. Had become exactly what Travis feared, a good man who'd crossed into darkness and couldn't find his way back. But Emma was safe, sleeping peacefully, dreaming of puppies and soccer games and all the normal things 11-year-olds should dream about. And Edward Powers was dead, having suffered more than any court could have ordered, more than any legal punishment could have achieved. The system had given him 30 years. I'd given him justice. Maybe that made me a monster. Maybe it made me a father. Probably it made me both. I could live with that. Behind me, the screen door opened. Melissa joined me on the porch, sliding her arms around my waist. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked. "Just thinking about how lucky we are. How far Emma's come. She has, hasn't she? I was so scared she'd never recover. That he'd broken something in her that couldn't be fixed. She's stronger than we knew. Stronger than he could have imagined. Because of you. Because you protected her when it mattered. If only she knew." "We both did," I said. "We're a team." She kissed my cheek. "Always." We stood there in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness, listening to the neighborhood sounds of suburban life. Normal, peaceful, safe. Everything I'd fought for, by any means necessary. And if someday Emma asked me what I'd done to protect her, if someday she learned the truth about how Edward Powers really suffered, I'd tell her the same thing I told myself every night. Sometimes the law isn't enough. Sometimes a father has to become something darker to keep the darkness away from his daughter. Sometimes justice wears a civilized face and follows proper procedures. And sometimes it requires blood and suffering and the kind of vengeance that can't be written in legal briefs. I'd chosen the latter path. Walked it without hesitation, without regret. And I'd walk it again if I had to. Because Emma was sleeping peacefully in her room with a puppy at her feet, dreaming innocent dreams in a world I'd made safer by making myself dangerous. That was the only metric that mattered. Melissa went back inside, calling me to bed. I followed, glancing back once at the stars. Somewhere up there, maybe Edward Powers was experiencing whatever afterlife awaited men like him. Maybe there was justice beyond what I'd orchestrated. Maybe there wasn't. Either way, it didn't matter. Because he'd paid in this life, paid in ways that satisfied something deep and primal in me, paid enough that I could sleep at night knowing my daughter's monster was gone. I closed the door behind me, locked it, force of habit now, always checking locks, always ensuring barriers between my family and the world, and headed upstairs to where Melissa waited. Tomorrow, Emma would wake up excited about her puppy. We'd take it to the park, teach it tricks, watch our daughter laugh, and play without fear. And I'd be there, present and engaged, the loving father who'd do absolutely anything to protect his child. Even become a monster myself. Especially that. Because in the end, that's what love required. Not the pretty, sanitized version people talked about in wedding vows and greeting cards. Real love. The kind that drew lines in the sand and dared the universe to cross them. The kind that said, "You hurt mine, I hurt you back." Worse. Always worse. Edward Powers had learned that lesson too late. And anyone else who ever threatened my family would learn it too. That was my promise to Emma, sleeping peacefully upstairs. That was my promise to myself. And it was a promise I'd keep, no matter what it cost me. Because I was her father. And that meant everything. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.